Liverpool's line.
Hello and welcome to episode 13 of the Goal Difference podcast. I am the louder, better, stronger, faster Liverpool supporting twin and your host today, Lola Katz Roberts, and this is Scarlett, my Arsenal supporting twin who is like me, but a bit worse. Today we're going to unpack everything from a glorious Sunday afternoon at Anfield, including Scarlett's emotional baggage, as well as all the fallout from a titanic top-of-the-table clash. Scarlett, how's your week been? Well, you're certainly the louder twin, aren't you? I've been taught to project for radio. Listen, there's been a lot going on. We've had the family derby, we've had deadline day, but there was one signing that went a bit under the radar this week. One of those old school ones where it just sort of comes out of nowhere. Alexander Isak is Liverpool's new number 9. How does that feel? Is that meant to be funny? Like, genuinely. Tell me how you're feeling. I asked you a question. Is it under radar? Absolutely not. Obviously, ha ha ha. Did I expect it? Yes. We've have had and will have many conversations about the Isak transfer. I wish you well. I also wish his groin well. A genuine question for you, Scarlett. When the Isak news first broke way back 6 weeks ago, I felt that the reaction, in fact, you tweeted something at the time about how you felt it impacted the title race and how gutted you were that Arsenal hadn't chosen to pursue that if he was going to be for sale this summer. Do you think that the length of time this saga has rumbled on for has allowed you to kind of like emotionally resolve those feelings that you had when the news was first announced? Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Isak was the one for Arsenal. I think that was made pretty publicly clear that they were massive admirers of his, and he seemed in many ways like the heir to that Henry type player that we've been missing since Aubameyang. So it was absolutely a blow to see him be linked to Liverpool in that way and to see Arsenal seemingly not moving for him. I think the consensus at the time and now was that it was about prioritising the sum of the parts over an individual, and I still think the jury's going to be out until we know who's going to win the title, really. I think Liverpool have done this incredible doubling down in attacking recruitment, and you intended to sign Guehi but didn't. And none of this will matter if you have the kind of stress-free injury luck that you had last season, but it does put you in a slightly interesting position in terms of where your resources are stacked in the squad. And there's no doubt that, Isak adds to an already... What superlative can I say about the Liverpool attack? Already incredible attack. But I do think in many ways it's as you were with the title race. It's the best defence against the best attack. So let's get going. Let's see. I did want to just mention, see what you thought of a social media post that came out this week, which was one of those Liverpool aggregator accounts called Anfield Sector that posted a black and white picture of Diaz and Núñez next to a colorized picture of Isak and Wirtz, saying, name a bigger upgrade in the history of the sport. And obviously Mo Salah nibbled at that and basically said, show some respect to the people that won you the title. It is interesting, the revisionism that's already at play in the fan base and the revisionism around new signings, which is always that because they are new, they therefore must be better. I think Isak is undoubtedly an upgrade, but who knows what Ekitike will be in the context of the numbers that Diaz and Núñez combined put together last season. Yeah, I mean, I think Diaz is a class player. I really, really do think he was everything. He was all output, wasn't he? I would disagree. He was output last season, but then he didn't score a Premier League goal between December and February. See, now that's something I didn't know. Okay, we're getting distracted. We have obviously got a hell of a lot of reacting to do. It's the wake of the Katz Roberts derby. There's loads to unpack. That means our scanners are twitching and bleeping in our pockets, ready to pull up all the emotional baggage of what Sunday entailed. Given we've been squabbling all week, I have a pretty good idea of how Scarlett's feeling. So let's engage those scanners. Lola, I'm pretty pleased that in this Twintution segment, you actually don't have right of reply, which means I'm free to say whatever I want without fear of reproach. How do you feel? This is a safe space, Scarlett. All right. So, engaging my scanner, here's what I think. I think you're really unhappy. No, I'm joking. I think you've had like the best week of your life watching replays and different angles and the ref cam of Szoboszlai's goal. I know from celebrating goals against you that the Katz Roberts derby can mean more. So I think not only did you get to beat Arsenal, and Arsenal massive, not only did you get to beat your title rivals, but you also beat me. So that must feel pretty sweet. I know what it feels like. It feels amazing. Although sometimes I feel sorry for you when we win. Okay, so I think you're absolutely cock-a-hoop. I think to get down to the nuts and bolts of the game, when you saw the lineup, I think you thought you were pretty happy because it was a lineup that lent into conservatism for reasons that we'll get into later. But then I think in the first half you were getting scared because Anfield was quiet. The febrile and intimidating atmosphere was at a kind of low murmur. And I think you were worried. I think for you, maybe it started looking like one of those home games where you're like, hang on a minute, this isn't going to plan. And sometimes those don't come back. So I think it suited us that the game was drifting in the first half. I think that would have made you nervous. But I also think you probably thought you had to come out better after half time. So I think in the second half, you were concentrating on the raw and urgent task of sucking the ball into the net. And you succeeded. I think you were probably having some concerns about Kirkez against Madueke. I think he looked our biggest threat. And to be fair to Kirkez, he never said die, but he looked in difficulty, I would say. So I think that was probably a worry for you. But I think more generally, you got your goal. Not only did you score, it wasn't some bouncing off someone's arse in the penalty box. It was a beautiful free kick. And I'll give you that. It was a wonder goal. So, that's great. But I think everything feels shiny and rosy. But I do think you'll be feeling relief. And the reason why is because it was a very close run affair, because you don't have to play us again, and because it's par. Winning at home against your rivals is par, and you would have been disappointed with any other result. So I think coming out of this start in the Premier League with 3 wins, despite not playing particularly inspiring football, I think will make you feel like, once again, you are the rightful heirs to the title. God has chosen you, and smiles down on the Scousers. Okay, well, lots to come back to there later, Scarlett, when we get into the meat of our analysis. But in the meantime, time for me to apply my powers of Twintution to you. Just as a starting point, you're absolutely gutted. That one hurt, didn't it? I can actually tell by the ferocity of your response, especially nibbling at the suggestions that Arsenal didn't try to win the game. You've been pretty hot on that all week. I've seen you on Twitter. So it's been a lot of screenshots, lots of messages on TikTok. All that game does, I think, is it speaks to your fundamental doubts about Arteta, which I know that you have, and his ability to take risks in high pressure situations, which, I don't think you have any doubt about his ability to win lots of football matches. I don't think you have any doubt about him creating a team that keeps clean sheets, but I think you have a doubt about whether he can be the guy that wins the matches in the high pressure moments. And look, the truth is only one team tried to win the game on Sunday, and deep down, that was Liverpool. Your heart would have sunk as soon as you saw that team sheet. It feels very early in the season for familiar fears to be returning like a blanket of wet fog on a winter's evening. But the truth is, summer's optimism is well and truly over. You're doubting Mikel Arteta. You're doubting the summer signings. Victor Gyökeres hardly had a kick. And I know, no matter how much you like to tell yourself it's brave the way you play, you don't want to see your team time wasting it 0-0. You don't want it, no matter how much you try. It's like me with Trent, and I was desperately trying to claim Trent's a good defender. You don't want to be time wasting it 0-0. When do we get to talk about the game? So that's it. I'm sure it was gutting. And I hope you'll acknowledge this on air. I actually reached out with quite a classy message after the game, to which I said, you will be okay this season. And I absolutely stand by that. Arsenal will be okay. The quality that seems to be at odds with your messaging about. But my message, you've been okay the last 3 seasons. You will be okay. The players you were able to bring off the bench, as Odegaard, brilliant players to have. And that, we'll move on now to talk about the game. But that is my fundamental beef with Arsenal. Let's forget the shithousery, because, that's part of Arteta's small margins and how he plans on winning football games. And he's been successful with it. My problem with Arsenal that I put to you, and this time you do have right of reply, is you had the squad depth on us, we had Curtis Jones was the first sub to come on for McAllister, who wasn't fully fit, and then Chiesa in the 70th minute. And Arne Slot's never brought, in a game that he hasn't started, obviously, Slot's never brought him on before the 70th minute, simply because, there's obviously a lack of trust there, much as he's a fan favourite. And then you've got wonder kid Rio Ngamoa, who played about 10 minutes at Newcastle on Monday night. And then a departing Harvey Elliott. So the bench was thin for us. Whereas for Arsenal, despite the injuries, we've talked in depth this summer about how what Arsenal have really pushed in terms of recruitment is players in that 26, 27-year-old bracket, instant impact players, Premier League ready players that are ready to come and make an impact. And you had two of those on the bench in Odegaard and Eze. So here's the thing for me. You knew that you were facing a Liverpool side that were building the ship while sailing. And you knew about RFE start, and Arteta will have watched the clips of all the problems that Bournemouth and Newcastle caused us. So tell me why the game plan, why didn't you take it to us like you took it to us in 22-23 when you went 2-0 up playing brilliant football?
Well, let's actually address a few things before we get started. Why was Martin Odegaard on the bench, Lola?
He had a knock?
Because he hadn't trained all week and he was injured. So Martin Odegaard was not fit to play the full game.
Forgive me if I have slight reservations over who's injured and who's not.
I guarantee this to you now. Had Martin Odegaard been fit, he would have started.
But that's the point, is now...
Okay, but no, because you're levelling at me. You have two creative players on the bench. Why aren't they playing? I'm telling you.
No, I'm not saying why aren't they playing. I'm saying when you have those weapons, why aren't you going for the game?
Because they're not on the pitch. Odegaard could not play that game. Our captain and starting attacking 8 could not start the game. He was not physically fit enough. As I've said already, I guarantee you Arteta starts his captain if he can. That's a given. The other person who you have on that bench, who you've identified as a creative player, is Eze. And there is absolutely a debate within the Arsenal fans about whether he should have started, because, of course, when he came on, he looked miles, and we probably agree on this, he looked miles better than Martinelli. But this is the biggest game of our season so far. Eze hadn't even trained with the team for a whole week. Like, you're asking a lot of someone who is new to the system. To an Arteta team, we know they play a very specific style of pressing football. I won't pretend to understand the triggers, but I know that they're numerous. So in that sense, you can see the reservations in sticking Eze in. And Martinelli, who started on the left wing, who, again, we can both get into the kind of problems with what's happened to his game, has scored 6 goals against Liverpool. It's the most of any team.
There's a pretty obvious common denominator in Martinelli's good performances against Liverpool, and that is Trent Alexander-Arnold playing at right back. But I think, look, we're splitting hairs here, because the point is how you approach a football match is not just about personnel; it's about setup.
But I don't think
you're breaking the rules here. You can't shout over me while I'm talking. And even in the first half, we've talked about Arteta's horseshoe of doom, where Arsenal had the territory and they had the possession. Scarlett, the truth is, across 90 plus minutes, Arsenal did not have a clear-cut opportunity. And the reason that I think that's a crime is because Newcastle and Bournemouth were cutting through us at will. So why couldn't Arsenal do that?
Well, just to come back to what I was saying before, I think the approach is absolutely informed by who you have available to you. And let's not forget, we were without our first choice striker. Come on, we know Havertz would have started that game. And without our best attacker.
Well, I don't know. We both like Havertz and would have started, but I don't think we do know that.
I think it's pretty much a consensus, and obviously none of us are party to Mikel Arteta's exact thought process, but I think it's pretty much agreed that Havertz is still there to play a lot of football, and particularly when Gyökeres isn't even fully fit, I'm pretty sure he would have started that game and offered quite a lot more to the team generally. And our best attacker was not available in Bukayo Saka. So this is the equivalent, let's say, of you being without Salah, because that's our Saka, and you being without pick one of Ekitike and Isak, your first choice striker. So that's a pretty big loss to the attacking unit, first of all. And then, so what does Arteta have going into this game? Well, he started with his first choice back four. So he has a strong defensive unit and a strong lower base of the midfield in Rice and Zubimendi. That's who he's got, who are his trusted first choice guys. And then you throw it forward and you have Martinelli, who is struggling for form and confidence, but you hope might offer something against Liverpool because he tends to. You hope in a transitional game, he might have space to run into. I can see the thought process there. You have Gyökeres, who's not fully fit, who loves to get on the shoulder of the defender, and who potentially could have been played through on goal in the first half had Martinelli made a better decision. And you have Noni Madueke, who, let's be clear, he's a good player.
But Scarlett, you are acting. So Newcastle, for example, when they played us, had to play Anthony Gordon up front. And, we think he's a good player, but he's not a striker. Arsenal are in a situation where they were able to field 120 million or thereabouts worth of talent in Noni Madueke and Victor Gyökeres. I just don't think I don't think it's fair on teams like Bournemouth and Newcastle, who were brave and attacked against us and created chances, to suggest that because you were missing Saka, Odegaard, whoever, that meant that you couldn't be more adventurous.
Well,
this is 120 million British pounds, not euros, worth of attacking talent. Like, Scarlett, they need to do better.
Look, you cannot take the context out of this conversation. Had this game been in 10 games, 10 weeks' time, these players have all had time to settle into the team. You can absolutely judge their productivity a lot more. Do I think Arsenal could have been more creative? Do I think they would have wanted to be more creative? Absolutely. I don't think it worked. I don't think they got the ball to Gyökeres quick enough. I don't think Martinelli was effective enough. But I can't lay that blame at Arteta's door when his hand was forced by circumstance.
But this is the issue. So we're going to move on to talk about the big question, which is the conservatism question. But I'm not trying to be incendiary here, because there's the discourse about Arsenal fans having excuses. You're aware that exists. And I think that you are letting the manager off here, having a bad afternoon, because all this talk about injuries and whatever, at the end of the day, you had a much stronger bench than we had on the day, and you were hardly playing bums in your attack. Madueke is no bum.
But I've just explained to you why I think it wasn't joined up and cohesive.
I know, but there's no excuse not to go for it. I just don't think. Where's the excuse? Bournemouth had loads of injuries when they played.
But Bournemouth were 2-0 down against you, so of course they went for it.
They were
attacking game state.
But that's okay. But you watched the first half and you twintuitionized me and said how nervous I would have been in the first half when they were making chances. Newcastle made loads of chances at 0-0.
Newcastle was swarming all over you because they were the home team and they were buoyed by this massive
atmosphere. I don't think
atmosphere.
I am taking context out of it. I simply am saying that I think you need to hold the manager to account. At this point, he's got, when you were having Waneri step in for Saka last season, much as he's a very talented individual and he's going to go on to do great things, that there's obviously a major drop off there. And there is a big gap between Saka and Madueke. But, you're not rocking up with Rio and Gamoa on your right side.
Let's talk about who came on, because I actually think that is an interesting point where I do have questions for Arteta, because who came on the right-hand side? Max Dowman, 15 years old.
Okay, let's move on. We'll carry on talking about Mikel Arteta, but let's talk about the way the game progressed and how he managed the game as it went on.
I disagree with you, by the way, about having beef with the way my manager sets up. This is post hoc analysis. The reality of the game was, I don't think Liverpool tried particularly hard to win it either. There's plenty of clips doing the rounds of Alisson waiting for the striker to come and pressure him and picking up the ball. I mean, you had fewer shots than us. We don't need to get bogged down in the numbers. The truth is, the numbers tell you it was an even game, because it was. There's no denying that.
I think the problems for me come in two ways. Number one, all the chat beforehand, and you will have seen this across Arsenal media outlets, is people saying this is as confident as they've ever been going to Anfield. And that was largely about our performances, I think, more than yours.
Well, I'm not saying that.
I think you were pretty confident.
But I'm confident generally going into big games, because I think we've got a fighting chance, and I think we showed that in this game. But to be honest, we were more depleted than I could have even computed, because we lost our key player to our build. We lost our spine. We lost our Van Dijk. We were without our Salah, and we were without our Isaac Ekitike.
The principles remain the same. You play the same football.
No,
regardless
that's
of who's
not
on the
true.
pitch.
Because if regardless of how good Mosquera was, and he was good, I think you would agree. If somebody is the centerpiece in how you build, it doesn't matter if you have the same principles. It's not going to work the same if you have Saliba, who is known for his ball playing ability, who has a particular role in the build-up, and you parachute in Mosquera. It's not going to be the same. The reality is, there is a drop off.
Okay, let's talk about the first half, where Arsenal had the better of it, and according to all statistical metrics, had the territory and you had more chances. What I want to ask you, in a first half where you would freely admit, right, that you think Arsenal dominated the first half, don't you? So genuinely, so that I can understand it, tell me why Declan Rice took, and I counted in the stadium, 35 seconds to walk to take a corner in the first half. Tell me why. In a first half that you were dominating.
I think it's really normal to try and manage a difficult away game. And I think, again, this is post hoc criticism, because if Arsenal were 1-0 winners, that would have been brilliant game management. I think the reality of Anfield is in the first half, it was super, super quiet. And what contributes to that? Probably a bit of frustration, probably a bit of lackadaisicalness in the Liverpool approach, Arsenal controlling the ball. So, of course, that's part of the game plan. When you have a team under pressure, you want to ramp up the pressure and ramp up the intensity and force a breakthrough. So why would you stall the momentum by time wasting in that moment?
I think time wasting is too strong a word. I would really like to see how urgently Liverpool took their corners in the first half, because let me tell you, it did not feel like Liverpool were moving
but
we
pace.
Weren't, because we were under pressure.
But I think that's the thing. It's like the idea that Arsenal in that situation had a moral obligation to go for it. We know that this Liverpool side is at their most dangerous in transition. I think that like Slot said after the game, there was so much respect on the field, and it was cagey. It was a cagey match. I think both teams, for the first half especially, were really worried about the threat that the other side posed. I think it's true. Arsenal were worried about the transition.
I think that also feeds into Liverpool's first half performance, which was respect for Arsenal's weapons. And actually, what was really interesting to me is, having watched Liverpool be, in the main, despite some improvements at St James's Park, very vulnerable to long balls and set pieces. It was really interesting to me that Arsenal didn't, apart from the knockdown to Madueke on the edge of the area, Arsenal didn't have a meaningful set piece opportunity.
Again, it frustrated me. Sky, you weren't watching, but Sky kept flashing up a graphic of Arsenal taking so many outswinging corners. Why have Arsenal taken so many outswinging corners? And it's because, of course, normally that corner is taken by a left footer, either Saka or Odegaard, both of whom went on the pitch. And then you're like, should Madueke have taken it? I don't know. But I think that significantly diminishes our ability to be threatening.
For both sides was about containment. So let's move on to the second half. And I had lovely pie at half time with Mum.
What flavour was your pie?
Steak pie. Very good pie. And I was frustrated at half time, but I actually wasn't frustrated with Liverpool. I was, the general atmosphere, by the way, just to sort of offer some colour, was the first half. I agree with you, it was quiet, but it wasn't toxic. And you've been on the end of toxic Anfield, you've seen it get ugly. It really wasn't like that. There was frustration at the referee. In fact, there was one moment when I think Calafiori had a shot, it went wide, and then he basically just shouted at the ref, and then you got given a corner. So there was some frustration around the weakness of the referee and Arsenal tactics. But as you say, I was confident that we were quite a strong second half team last season, and Slot has shown a real adaptability in those team talks. So I was quite confident that we'd come out second half strongly. But then, and Slot has spoken post-match about the changes he made half-time, going man-to-man, and how that freed up space, in particular for Florian Wirtz. And this is chicken and egg. I don't know if the crowd got up because Wirtz was finding more pockets of space on the left, or the crowd got up and then the spaces started opening up. But on around, and you can see this in the cumulative XG map for the game, on around the 66th minute, there was a change. Now, if you ask me and Mum, the shift in momentum towards Liverpool came about because the Arsenal fans started with a rendition of their homemade "Ale Ale Ale" imitation, and
which multiple teams throughout the world sing as a song, but for some reason it's a problem that Arsenal did.
And then all four corners of the ground stood up and did "Ale Ale Ale," and I would say my feelings in that moment were, okay, they can't hurt us. We might as well try and win this. But one thing I also want to say, though, on the XG thing is what XG... So I've done some research into what XG doesn't count. And XG obviously doesn't count any chances where there was an offside action. So our offside goal, for example, that didn't register in XG, even though the Wirtz shot beforehand was onside. It was Gakpo afterwards that made it offside. And what it also doesn't register is things like, it doesn't register on the XG when Van Dijk starts making line-breaking passes, when Curtis Jones is taking more risks with receiving the ball in midfield. So I think there's a few intangibles, but what I can tell you is that on around the 65th minute, Liverpool started taking more risks, and that is how they won the free kick.
Okay,
led them to win the game.
Okay, let's actually just engage with that for a second. First of all, your XG was still under 1. So whatever you did, whatever these intangibles were, I think it's absolutely semantics and splitting hairs to try to find these moments that wouldn't have been recorded in a stat that was less than 1.
Yeah, but this is whether you're an XG disciple or not.
But that's the point. It's like the numbers sure, they don't tell the whole story, but they tell a general picture of the game. And I'm not saying Arsenal were more dangerous than Liverpool, by the way. I just think neither of us were particularly dangerous. I think that's a fair thing to say. It is true. Van Dijk played a couple of passes, line-breaking passes. And I think what I've absorbed from listening to analysis of the game is Szoboszlai left Martinelli to the defence. He was just like, right, you're not a threat.
So we had overloads in wide areas.
And Arsenal's 3-man midfield was causing some kind of issue for you, outnumbering you in the first half, which it stopped doing because Szoboszlai essentially said, I'm going to be a number 10. But anyway, I think, yes, on or around the 60-minute mark, Liverpool started to look more dangerous. From where I was sitting, I was like, well, this is what we were kind of waiting for all along. Like, I think Arsenal were expecting an off-the-ball game in that lineup. And actually what happened was in the first half, we had the ball, which was quite surprising. So I was like, you know what? I'm nervous. This feels uncomfortable, but that's what you expect at Anfield.
But I think if we dig into what the actions were that were intangible on the XG, like the Van Dijk line breaking passes, is fundamentally when you're doing things like that, when Gravenberch is dropping a shoulder and beating players in his own half, those are risk-taking actions that may not pay off in terms of actually setting up a chance, but what they definitely do is open up space. And I think if I boil down my beef with the Arsenal performance and take out set pieces, because, that's just a sort of individual weapon that you use to attack us.
And a totally equal way of scoring.
But I don't know. We can,
it is. It's goals are goals.
But I think didn't see from very technically proficient Arsenal midfielders like Zubimendi, like Declan Rice, prior to Eze and Odegaard coming on, is any attempt to take those risks on the ball. And, you can say that that's all part of an away performance and that's, part of the discipline of coming to Anfield and all of that. But the fact is that I'm not the only person to say this. Lots of pundits said Liverpool were there for the taking. So why is it that incredibly technically proficient footballers didn't break the lines? This isn't about making chances. This is about taking risky passes.
Well, I think in the first half, okay, like I said to you, I think we were expecting an off-the-ball game. We were expecting what Liverpool were doing to us from the 60th minute onwards. So we were set up differently to how it then panned out to be. I think we were set up for a transition game where Martinelli and Gyökeres and Noni were going to bomb into the spaces.
You're on first name terms already.
Of course, I love Noni. So I think it wasn't what we expected. But sure, I do think the criticism that is fair of Arsenal in the whole ambition conversation is, they could have been better on the ball. They could have been more incisive on the ball. I think what happened was, though, at that point on 60 minutes, when you started to get the momentum, Arsenal were pinned back. So I think beyond that point, they were defending, weren't they? And then I think the question you can level at Arteta, which people have, is could he have made those attacking changes, Odegaard and Eze, earlier? Because I think Curtis Jones came on around 60 minutes, and that's when it really tipped towards Liverpool. But I think the flip side of that, and what I was thinking when I was watching, is Liverpool are always going to have a spell. They're the home team. Like I said, I was expecting that from the beginning. So
I think it's interesting, though. Eze obviously took on his man straight away. So Eze did his thing, which is to look really dangerous and always look like he could create something. He had one burst into the box where it was smothered. But Odegaard was really interesting to me because he was often picking up the ball in front of the Liverpool back four in the pockets of space where he likes to, but he was waving his arms around and saying, run, move. And there wasn't that off the ball intent from Arsenal. So I think you haven't quite managed to convince me that Arsenal weren't conservative. I take your point about it being hard to build up.
No, I just want to say, I think Arsenal absolutely were like control oriented in their approach. I just think it is a willful obfuscation of context to criticise them for that, given the catastrophic losses in the team.
But I just think that, but the context, you're criticising me for ad hoc interpretation of the game. Pre-match, your mood would have been go and attack it.
I think in pre-match, my mood would have been go and attack it had we had our best attackers.
No, but you still, if they'd started with Eze, say, which, you know,
I would have been happy, but I sympathised in advance and live on air with why he wouldn't start.
I just think that before the game, you felt that, because it was an opportunity to make a statement, because when you come to Anfield in the heat of battle, when things have warmed up a bit and, like, you know, there's real, you know, you're in the muck and bullets of the season and things are like properly on the line. You know, I felt, I was walking around, you could actually get into the club shop before the game. Normally there's a huge queue. The whole atmosphere was very relaxed and very early season. So for my money, that's a really good time to come to Anfield. And I think in terms of our start, in terms of our defending, in terms of the way we struggled with physical teams pushing us around, I just think that before the game, you were thinking, go and have a crack at them. They are there to be got at.
I think I thought that, and I hate to be saying this because it's boring and no one likes it. I think I thought that when I thought we had a few more players fit, but I think it's absolutely a factor, by the way, in whether your team deserved to win the title. And we'll come to this when we talk about the title race at some point. Part of being a good team is keeping your players fit, and that's an issue I have with the club. But anyway, let's move on.
Yeah, I'd just like to round off the discussion by saying that Erling Braut Haaland at 2.60 has more open play XG than Arsenal Football Club this season at 2.21. So,
and Liverpool's XG differential is absolutely middling.
We've just about got through that without killing each other. Scarlett, how are you feeling?
I feel angered.
So do I, actually. So what better moment then to move on to adopting our roles as arbiters of justice across footballing family feuds. The Podcasting Judiciary Committee have vested in us the power to adjudicate on matters arising from footballing family feuds. So without further ado, I want to welcome to the show Mr. Tom Rayner, who has a story to tell about that infamous Arsenal versus Liverpool 3-3 back in December 2017 that we spoke about last week.
Hi guys, long-time listener, first-time caller, so very excited to be here. My family feud was brought back into my mind after you discussed the 3-3 between Liverpool and Arsenal a few years back. Despite being a Chelsea fan, my brother decided he'd prefer to see me suffer than his rivals across town suffer that day. Their equaliser goes in, and safe to say I'm starting to get pretty rattled. He's sat in front of me, and I somewhat politely tell him to keep quiet if Arsenal score a third. Ozil does what he did, and in the reflection of our telly, I see this stupid little smirk come across his face. That was enough to tip me over the edge, and I proceeded to launch the telly remote at him from point blank range, leaving him with a trip to A&E and me firmly on the naughty step. So what do you guys reckon? Who's in the wrong here?
Ooh, Tom Rayner.
So yeah, go on, Scarlett. Tell us, who do you think's in the wrong in this scenario?
I think the difficulty here are the stitches and the smirk. I just, it doesn't sound like the brother did that much.
For what it's worth, I'm just going to dive in and give my view, which is that if you smirk, you deserve what's coming your way. That said, I do not condone physical violence in any form, but there should be absolutely no sibling smirking happening anywhere near a football.
Maybe I should bring some family feuds of my own to this podcast, because there's definitely been times
Well, while we're on the subject, it was definitely wrong when you and Jake celebrated in my face when you scored against Crystal Palace and started slapping me.
I don't think I did that. But anyway, sorry, Tom Rayner, you can't be giving someone stitches because they smirked at you. That's ridiculous. I find myself relieved and glad that this is worse than anything that happened when we were watching football as children.
Yeah, I don't know if there's some sort of like male rage associated with whatever happened there, but stitches is a no-no for me. Although I will say Mr. Will Rayner, who I believe was the on the receiving end of the TV remote, no smirking. No smirking.
See, I don't know the Rayners personally, but...
Well, I've never met Will Rayner, but I'm assuming that there are other Rayner brothers, but I think this is the one in question. This is the Chelsea sibling, and I think there should be absolutely no Chelsea smirks anywhere near a Liverpool game. So, Tom, you're in the wrong. Physical violence is a no-no, but Will, no smirking. Okay. We have covered a lot of ground here today, Scarlett. So before we finish today, I want to do a vibe check, sister to sister. 3 games have gone in the season. We're in the international break. It is time to take stock. We've had the madness of deadline day, of Liverpool breaking the British transfer record for the best striker in the Premier League. So where are you at 3 games in? Tell me, what's the vibe? I think that was a sickener. It's been so long since we've lost a game of that magnitude. It's something that you don't get over quickly. I think my hope for this team and my hope for the fan base and Arteta is that this can be a City getting mugged off a bit 1-0 at the Emirates on their way to winning the title in a very even and cagey game. And I believe that's possible. I saw no footballing reason last Sunday why Arsenal can't go all the way in the title race. I think it's up to mentality now. So it's look in the mirror time. But I feel a steely and fiery determination. How do you feel, Lola? Well, I felt walking out of Anfield on Sunday that it's the happiest, most relaxed, weirdly, that I've felt the ground. Anfield can be, there's so many different faces of Anfield. It can be toxic, it can be on its toes, it can be angry. But actually what I realised is, obviously, there was lots of things in the run-in where suddenly you're realising that actually Liverpool fans, most of us in recent memory, in living memory even for me, had not been in the stadium for a successful run-in. Just like because of COVID, we haven't been in the stadium to welcome back our champions. And it did feel different. And it kind of clicked in my head that I kept thinking why do they get to keep winning year after year after year? How do they have the motivation to carry on? And it's because it's not a noose around your neck anymore. It's a weight off your shoulders. You're like, God, I would love us to win this football game. And even the nerves, even the insane nerves that I was feeling in the last 10 minutes were almost I could almost laugh at myself. So I'm in love with this team. I'm in love with the manager. I love the signings. And my biggest takeaway is lots of people say Arsenal's floor is higher than Liverpool's floor, but my God, is Liverpool's ceiling higher? And I think, Alexander Isak just takes that ceiling and raises it into outer space. So I love this team. I'm absolutely in love with my team. Okay, that has been the Goal Difference podcast. I've been your host, Lola Katz Roberts, and thank you very much to my charming and level-headed panellist, Miss Scarlett Katz Roberts. Thank you also to our caller, Mr. Tom Rayner, for ringing in and sharing his story. Please do email us at goaldifferencecommunity@gmail.com. That is goaldifferencecommunity@gmail.com to share stories, ask us questions, and give us your feedback on the show. It's always welcome. As always, we ask that you follow, subscribe, and review all of the things. If you like what we do, please help us grow. Thank you very much for joining us this week. Bye-bye.